Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. It's Greg with Care Boost Health and I'm here with Diane Lang today. Diane is a therapist, a life coach, and an author. She is joining us today to talk a little bit about using positive psychology to find happiness in your life. Also, she's going to be talking a little bit about an upcoming workshop we have here May 4th, 6:30 here at the center. We're going to be talking about positive psychology as a tool to find happiness in life in a little bit more detail, so if you're able to, come join us. So without any further ado, Diane, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. So, Diane, you're a life coach. You specialize in positive psychology, and you're a positivity expert. Now, you and I in the field, those terms are a little bit more familiar to us, but
Right.
to people who may not know, why don't you tell us a little bit about, kind of what do you do as a life coach, and what do you do as a positivity expert, and what that looks like when you work with people?
So positive psychology is the newest branch of the sciences, and it's not even that new. It's from the 80s. And what we do in the field of positive psychology, whether you're a researcher, an educator, or a coach, is we actually study what makes us happy, what makes us resilient, and why people are either more optimistic than others, because we have people who are more pessimistic and some people are more optimistic. So we study all of those different, tips on happiness, how to make people happier, what will make them happier, and can people be happier. And the great news and why I wanted to do the workshop here and how we can help people is allowing them to know that everybody can be happier than where they are today. And that's something we never used to know. We used to think, I'm just a victim of my DNA, this is who I am, I can't change. But now we know that we actually can, and that we can be happier than where we are today. And that's the great thing, and I want to go over some tips and tools on our workshop on May 4th so people can live their best, happiest, resilient lifestyle.
That's great. So you were talking a little bit about happiness. You're talking a lot about happiness. We all are. And I think that people kind of have a general sense of happiness. They know the feeling, right?
Yes.
But when we're talking about having more happiness in your life, what kind of a definition would you give that word in this context?
You know what, it's really hard to give the word happiness a definition because it is completely different for every person. So the best thing you can do is ask yourself, how do I define happiness? What does happiness look like for me? And believe it or not, it sounds like such an easy question to go, what makes you happy? But believe it or not, I have had clients who struggle with that. Because as we get older and we work and we have families, we start really focusing our attention on work, our kids, our spouses, and people can go, well, I know what makes my kids happy. I know what my spouse, what makes him happy or her happy. I know what my boss expects, but I have no idea what makes me happy. So sometimes it's just really taking some time to sit and go, what truly brings me happiness? And writing a list of about 5 things so you can figure it out. For me, it's really simple. I don't know if you know what makes you happy, Greg, but for me, I have 2 things right off the bat. My dog, I don't know if you're a dog lover or if anybody is, but I have the cutest golden retriever. He's 4 years old. That always brings me happiness. And chocolate. It's that easy. And I'm sure a lot of people put chocolate on their list. But knowing what makes you happy is an individual thing. So I want people to really think, what brings me joy all the time? Not externally, like, oh, I got a new car. That'll bring you a short-term boost to happiness. But what really brings you inside joy? I've had clients say a warm bath, being with friends or family, pets, all different things. But really find out what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's such a good point. A lot of times we will work with people who want to be happier.
Right.
And this may be the first time they've ever really had to answer that question. Well, what is it that makes me happy? Sometimes just having that direction, having something to aim for and to move forward for is such a huge step for so many people.
Yeah,
so it's good advice. So we've been talking a lot about positive psychology. We've been using that word a lot. And as you mentioned at the top, it's a newer field. I think people are familiar with psychology as the science of kind of understanding behavior and thoughts.
Right.
So how is positive psychology? What makes that its own special field within the bigger area?
Because, when we think about it, as you just said, we've actually been studying what doesn't work in life, what makes us depressed, mental illness. And for some reason, we never thought we could measure happiness. And I'm not sure why, but when we realized in the 80s that we can actually start measuring what makes people happy or happier, then we started really putting a whole science behind it so we can actually help people build those skills to be happier. And it's really taken off. In the 80s it wasn't that big, but then all of a sudden, the late 90s and early 2000s, you see it all over magazines, happiness. For me, one of the best things I love about it is it's actually based off of humanistic psychology. And everybody always remembers, Abraham Maslow, that hierarchy of needs, triangle. But humanistic was the foundation, and it was all about, reaching your full potential, being the best you can be, being responsible for your life.
Sure.
And from there, positive psychology really just took it to the next level. So positive psychology can be used in a counseling practice as well. You'll see a lot of people as therapists, and, I've worked as a therapist for years before I started doing more coaching. But I've always used it in my practice. But positive psychology is also the basis and somewhat of the foundation for life coaching. So you see a lot of wellness and life coaches really using positive psychology because the goal of the functioning client, meaning somebody who doesn't have mental illness, is really just to live their best life.
Sure.
And you're helping them get there.
That's great. That's a really good point. And you had mentioned that sort of hierarchy of needs.
Yes,
for those of you who don't have psychology degrees, it's the idea is at the bottom this big broad need for things like safety and security.
Yeah, your basic needs.
And then you kind of move up at the top. They talk about this very kind of like
self-actualization.
Yeah, it's very kind of like squishy concept, but really that, like we were talking about before, what do I really like in life and how do I pursue it? So a lot of people, they're able to kind of handle the bottom and the middle, but when you want to reach that top of the pyramid, that's a great time to seek out a life coach. That's a great time to get a little positive psychology in your life. So that's a really good explanation.
I know. You know what? I thought everybody took Psych 101, but they're probably so bored in that class, they forgot about Maslow.
Seriously, right.
So.
All right, so let me take a minute here. We are talking a lot about optimism, right? So I think about, I have a friend, they're fond of saying, I'm playing a little devil's advocate here because, optimism is a good thing. But, I have a friend, he likes to say, pessimists, they're either right or pleasantly surprised. So why is it so important, to make it a point to be more optimistic in your life?
There's a few things. There are, when we look at the happiness genetic set point, so everybody has one where they're just natural levels of happiness or optimism. And some people are down here and some people are up here just naturally. So when you think about it, some people will definitely be more optimistic, some will definitely be more pessimistic. But the other part is it's learned. It's a perspective on life, and you learn it really as early as childhood. From birth to about 8, 9 years old, you really start getting all those thought patterns, belief systems that you hold on to. So when you think about it, optimism could be a belief. I want to look at the world through, the glass half full, not to sound cliche. But when you do that and your perspective is focusing on the good of life and focusing good on your life, it actually makes everything else not so bad. So, at the end of the day, I'm either going to focus on what didn't I do well, I could have done better, I can't believe I said that, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Or I'm going to go to sleep with the good thoughts of, wow, look what happened that was good today. I got to see a friend I haven't seen in a while. I didn't hit a lot of traffic on Route 80. That never really happens, but just in case. Whatever it is, if I start focusing on the positive, I'm going to reduce my stress levels, and I'm going to enjoy life better.
Right.
So you want to think about optimism as a way of having your best life. And it really helps put you in a better mood and see things from the bigger picture and not focusing on what didn't work. So, you were asking before, what makes it different in a counseling or coaching practice? I make my clients, because I think they're used to it by now, but I make them come in and tell me what went right before we start with what they want to work on. I want to hear the good, for not just for that day, but if I see them bi-weekly for the last 2 weeks. Sum it up. Give me the top 3 to 5 things that really went well. And I make them do a lot of things like that because I want to kind of retrain the brain a little bit to actually start noticing the positive. So we stay in good moods, and we actually spread the good moods to others, which is big because moods and emotions are contagious.
You talk about moods and emotions and contagious, and that's a really good point. A lot of times people kind of think about their feelings or their moods, maybe not as something that they have a ton of control over, but you were using that word focus. We want to focus on the optimism. And it really is a matter of pessimism can serve a purpose in preparing for negative outcomes, but if you're in a situation where you don't feel happy enough in your life, you really need to get into this pattern of focusing. With my background in personal training, I like to talk to people about it, like just the way you exercise a given muscle in your body. exercise these different focuses, focusing on positivity.
Yes, absolutely.
Now that brings me to another point. We're kind of talking a little bit before we sat down today about kind of patterns of thinking. Now you touched on it a little bit,
Right.
but I was just wondering if you could come back and talk a little bit specifically about patterns of thinking and how you work with people in that
Sure.
capacity.
So, before I was saying we like to retrain your brain. And the first thing to think about is, being that you said personal training, I always think of brain as a muscle. You can train it, you can mold it, you can work it. Again, people used to think you were just a victim of your DNA and that you didn't have this ability to create change. But now that we know that's not true, we can actually rewire our brains to start noticing the positive. Now, don't get me wrong, when we talk about pessimism and optimism doesn't mean that you're not a realist. It doesn't mean that we expect everything to be good all the time. We're not Pollyanna. I know I'm going to have bad days, and that's okay. But what optimism does is it makes us more resilient. So when I have a few bad days, maybe I have the flu, and we have a few bad days, I can actually see the bigger picture. I can see that the outcome is the flu will end, and I will go back out, and life will be good again. And I get, some time to refresh, refuel, read my books that I wanted to. You could start seeing it. So we can actually start we have some tips and tools that I'll go over in the workshop that can really start retraining your brain. And the good thing about it is they're all simple, they're all free, and they don't change your schedule. Because that's one of the biggest things we hear from people, right? When they come in as a trainer,
Right.
How am I going to fit this into my schedule? Or how am I going to afford this? And the truth is, with positive psychology, you can do a lot of this at your home, and you could do it either early in the morning, right before bed. You could do it driving in your car, so it's not even going to change your schedule. So it's a really great place to start. And what we've noticed too is the more positive you become, the more optimistic you become, the more you want to do self-care, the more you want to come to Greg and get trained and take a yoga class, because mental and physical go hand in hand. If you're physically unhealthy, you emotionally feel it. If you're emotionally unhealthy, you physically feel it. They affect each other. I mean, one of the biggest things is 90% of doctor visits are stress-induced.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
that's a Harvard stat. And that's amazing to think about. So, stress plays such a huge role in our physical health as well as our emotional and spiritual. So it's great that we can be happier and improve on that
Right.
the way you can with personal training, and which maybe I need to do. Learn some ways to, get better biceps, but yes, something I don't have. I only stay in the emotional side.
Yeah, that's a really, you made a lot of really good points in there. You really made me think about something, kind of creating time to work on this. One of the
Yes.
things that I really like to talk to people about in a coaching context, in a positive psychology context, sometimes I feel like the ideas are relatively simple. Optimism is going to make you more happy than pessimism. It's the kind of stuff that you read a book about it, it's pretty easy to kind of, that makes sense. I find the real challenge is kind of creating that space to
Right.
build that new pattern, which is, again, one of the great reasons to work with a coach like Diane. It's one of the great reasons to take up that resource, because it's this extra support, creating this
Right.
new pattern, this new part of your lifestyle that's going to have these tiny little incremental steps to where you're just feeling a lot better. So, Diane, one of the things that I was reading about some of the work that you do is that you do a lot of work with mindfulness
Yes.
and meditation. So I had some questions about that. Just to start, mindfulness and meditation, these are words, maybe mindfulness a bit more than meditation. These are words you hear a lot in the
Yes,
wellness
very
context.
popular now.
Right, of course. So could you just give me a little breakdown? What's the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Sure. So meditation is actually a practice. And, the one thing about meditation is we always have such, a stereotype about it. I have to clear my brain. Everybody thinks like that, and they're like, I can't do that. I can't stop it. The truth is you have about 60,000 thoughts a day. You're not going to stop them, and we're not trying to make you stop your thoughts. What we're trying to do is give you a moment of calm and peace where the thoughts kind of go either in the back or they kind of float away like a cloud, so your focus is not there, so you can kind of refresh, refuel, get back to the present moment. So meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is really just a state of awareness. So we can be aware doing anything: washing dishes, driving a car, shopping, eating, which is a big one, because one of the things I've learned with clients is wasn't done on purpose, but the more mindful my clients became, the less they ate all the junk food. And they actually lost weight because they were more mindful and more aware and awake to what they were eating, when they were full, what they were putting into their bodies, how it made them feel.
Yeah.
So you could be mindful all the time. So when I teach a mindfulness class, it's different than just going to a meditation class where you actually sit for 30 minutes to an hour in a meditative pose, with your fingers out and doing a mantra. Mindfulness is a lifestyle, I like to say. It's really slowing down, being aware, being awake, not judging, which is, I know the hardest thing for me is not judging, because, we don't want to judge ourselves or others, but it's hard, and just observing life from that side of it. And it does bring almost the same benefits as meditation. Reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, lowers chronic pain, helps us to be more in the present moment in our conscious mind. It actually even helps us to be more intuitive and pay attention to our inner voice. So there's a lot of benefits for both, whichever you decide, or both. If you want to live a more mindful lifestyle and add meditation to your practice, which I'm sure here after yoga classes, at the end, another way to get some great meditation is when you come take a yoga class here, you'll get those benefits as well.
Right, yeah, our instructors are always really protective and mindful of that Shavasana period at the end, just to meditate and to be restful. And I like to think of the relationship between the two. It's like the relationship between exercise and fitness. Meditation and mindfulness, kind of similar relationships.
Yes. Yeah, they definitely go hand in hand. Definitely.
So, Diane, while you're here, especially with our focus on families, I would be remiss. I know you have done some work, written some books about, applying these ideas to the context of parenting. Yes. So for our parents out there, can you make this, what we've been talking about, kind of make it a little bit specific to that context?
Sure. So positive parenting is really based on working with the parent, not the child, because a lot of parenting classes was really about changing the child. What we do with positive parenting, or otherwise known as conscious parenting, is really about making the parent aware of their own behaviors, their own thought process. And what happens is kids learn through birth till about 8, 9 years old. They get most of their thoughts, their beliefs, their patterns. So where they're getting that from is the parents. So you really want to teach your children whatever personality traits you want them to have, character traits, values. You want to teach them through you. So you're the role model. That's what it is. And so we're changing the parent so the kid can learn through the actions of the parent. So really it's about being the best person you can be so the child really just follows suit. So it's really, again, being mindful and aware, which is the conscious part, and changing your thought patterns and your beliefs and becoming more positive, because really happy parents equal happy kids.
That's a really good point.
So, the happier you are, the happier your kids are, or your grandkids. If you're spending a lot of time there, always remember, moods and emotions are completely contagious. Within about 30 seconds to a minute, if Greg was in a bad mood, I would notice. We're hoping not, but within about 5 to 10 minutes, his mood could become my mood. So we really want to be positive because we want to uplift people, especially our kids.
Of course.
And we don't want to drain people and make them feel worse about themselves. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of power over that.
Yeah, especially with young kids, so sensitive to the mood in the room.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Diane, that's some great advice. If people want to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where can they find some information?
Well, I'll be here on May 4th, so hopefully you could come for a positive psychology workshop, and we'll actually be going over the 5 tips and tools that actually create happiness. So you can leave here with some really good concrete advice. The other place you can find me is at my website, which is dlcounseling.com. It's just my name, Diane Lang Counseling, and you can find all my resources there.
Well, Diane, thanks so much for sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, and we hope to see you guys at the workshop. But thanks
Have
for tuning in.
Have a great day.